Dear learners, welcome to the first module of this course on Women and Law in India. In this course, we will be traversing through multiple aspects of the legal terrains dealing with women's issues and different types of women's issues. Before we start our journey and try to understand the ways in which legal domain covers women and their concerns, we need to understand, we need to uncover, the colonial past. What had happened in the colonial past? How did our legal system evolve? And now this question arises in our minds, why do we need to discuss colonial India? Because the edifice of the modern system of law traces its origin in the colonial legal system. And we can still find the influence, we can see the influence, we do have those legacies of the colonial legal system. And that is why in this online discussion, we are actually going to discuss those legacies. So what do we need to understand that, how did the colonial past still has its influence on the contemporary Indian legal system. In this module, we attempt to explore the colonial legal history with special focus on women's status and rights. The legal history of women's rights in India is necessary for comprehending questions such as when did the efforts to bring change in women's status actually begin? Where have we reached till now? And what course of action do we need to opt for in future in order to attain social justice, in order to attain gender justice? So from pre-colonial to colonial legal system. So the pre-colonial period is marked by fluid, fragmented and pluralistic system of laws and administration, where multiple tribes, caste and other groups, subgroups, other types of collectivities were governed by their distinct existing customary practices. These customary practices were very important. To some extent, this can be said that the plurality and complexity, because it was very complex. So it all led to this perception that pre-colonial India did not have a proper legal structure. But on this idea, we do have debates. Scholars have their own viewpoints. Wide range of practices were there, and some of these might not fit into the ideals of reason, rationality, freedom and liberty. Amidst the growing uncertainties, British also had their self-proclaimed civilizing mission, which led to the development of a number of reforms, such as legislations concerning women, which were passed in different periods of colonial rule. We will be discussing this civilizing mission in detail. It is also referred as white man's burden. And there are a number of scholars who have gone into the details of this idea, which we will be covering later on. So the legislations came into operation as a result of social reform movement. You all must have done social reform movement in your school textbooks, and obviously the colonial intervention, which is important, very crucial. So these legislations covered different areas such as sati, widow remarriage, female infanticide, age of consent, child marriage, etc. Social reformers such as Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, Keshav Chandra Sen and many others have played crucial role in the passage of these legislations. Now, the role played by these legislations in reforming the status of women is again a matter of debate among the intelligentsia. We have scholars such as Lata Mani, Kumkum Roy, Uma Chakravarti, Sudesh Vaid, Tanika Sarkar, Janki Nair, who have made significant contributions, dealt extensively in this particular direction. Colonial law was developed as a series of charters, regulations, acts, etc. And along with these developments, we also have another very important trajectory which is known as courts, colonial courts, and because we had judiciary, so we also have case laws, a series of cases dealing with different issues. So before coming to the specific case laws and legislations which got evolved during colonial period, we also need to understand the codification of laws, because this was the starting point. Coming to the specific developments, because there were junctures. The East India Company, we all know this fact that it began as a commercial enterprise. It was a trading enterprise first in 1600 and then it assumed political and territorial power in 1757. We had Battle of Plassey. Then what do we see? That it got transformed into colonial formation. It acquires Diwani rights. With the acquisition of Diwani rights, the right to collect revenue in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha in 1765, it means after Battle of Buxar, the colonial rule gained strength. It acquired strength, and its roots got space within the Indian landscape. So therefore, now the company had to devise a new political and legal structure for the newly acquired dominions. With the onset of colonial rule, a change was proclaimed to be achieved in form of the establishment of rule of law, the stratified system of courts, because now we see judiciary and it is a proper judicial structure which also had stratas, and this came into existence. And then we also had this application of the principles of justice, equity and good conscience. So first major juncture was the Regulating Act of 1773, which is referred as the building block. It is a very important act passed by the British Parliament, and it provided for the framing of regulations under the aegis of Crown, which may be said to mark the beginning of colonial law. However, prior to 1773, Indians were not dealt with by the courts established under charters of 1726 and 1753. We had a series of charters in different courts. For example, Mayor's Court got established in 1726. So before 1773 also we had this series of different types of courts which got established. Under the Regulating Act of 1773, the Supreme Court of Judicature at Calcutta was established, and later the subordinate courts at Bombay and Madras also came into existence. So with judiciary got established, that's fine. But what do we need to adjudicate cases, to resolve the disputes? So for adjudication of disputes, one also needs to acquire familiarity with the laws, which were part of the system, which were considered by the people which were accepted by the people, which were there as part of the dominant structure of the society. As the courts were already there, so the colonial officials, now they had this understanding that they need to develop a body of knowledge about the people. And who were these people? Indians, which were also, so these Indians were also referred as indigenous, natives, subjects. We also, use this term colonized and colonizers. So the British were the colonizers and we were the colonized people. To understand the Indian realities, efforts made by the scholars learned in the classical languages, because there were languages of the subcontinent known as Orientalists, were noteworthy. Warren Hastings made important efforts, and these efforts are worth mentioning here. And what did he do? So he encouraged a group of younger servants of the company to devote themselves to the study of Sanskrit, Persian and Arabic. As Janki Nair has also, written about this idea, about these developments in detail. 11 Pandits learned in Shastras were chosen by Warren Hastings from various parts of Bengal to compile a digest, which would act as a tool to manage the flood of litigation, because the judiciary was already there, so the cases started pouring in, so now the courts have got this responsibility of resolution of disputes. So for that, this body of text was required, and obviously in the language in which colonial officials, the British judges, were comfortable in. Because it was not the case that the texts were not there, but the texts were multiple, many texts were there governing different groups, different identities, different people. And these texts were also in the local languages, not in English. So now, this development, apart from this development, Warren Hastings' plan of justice, or it is also known as the judicial plan, it was also significant, where he made the district as the unit of administration for judicial as well as other purposes, with the creation of Mufassil Diwani Adalat for civil cases and Mufassil Faujdari Adalat for criminal matters. Over the district courts, there were courts of appeal, and these courts of appeal were known as Sadar Diwani Adalat and Sadar Nizamat Adalat for civil and criminal matters respectively. Hastings' plan was considered as the first efforts to codify laws, and as a result, what do we see? That texts were produced, codification was done, and these texts were interpreted and understood by British in collaboration with indigenous scholars appointed to the colonial courts as qazis, as pandits. So coming to the specific text, now what do we see? That Hastings, what did he do? He commissioned a team of 11 pandits to compile and synthesize a digest of traditional Hindu legal codes, and this digest, which emerged from the deliberations of pandits, was known as Vivadarnava Setu. So Setu is, you know it well, it is bridge. So bridge across the ocean of litigation, as the name of the code is telling us that, we have got this ocean of litigation by now. and this was translated into English by Nathaniel Halhed from the Persian version of the original Sanskrit. Halhed's translation, known as a code of Gentoo laws or ordinations of Pandits, was designed to help British judges administer Hindu personal law with the help of, as we discussed, that the Qazis and Pandits were there appointed to the courts. So, text, and along with the text, the appointment of these indigenous scholars. So, this mechanism facilitated the process. And what process we are actually discussing about? So, it is the adjudication of cases, disputes. Initially, it was the Hindu law which was the focus of reform and codification, and later on, for Muslims, the core text chosen by Maulvis was Hidayah, which was translated from Arabic to Persian and then from Persian to English by Charles Hamilton. So, and Hidayah, you'll find when you'll go to the text, you'll find it in the introduction itself, and I quote it from there. The text remains a fascinating document in the history of colonial jurisprudence. The legal system was central to the entrenchment of British rule in India. This is something very important. That in order to gain strength, in order to establish themselves within the region, within the subcontinent, they knew, they had this understanding that law can act, law has the potential to act as one of the tools to, provide strength to their rule. So, the legal system was central to the entrenchment of British rule in India, providing the framework for active control of civil administration and courts. Translation of Islamic texts were intended to remove the language barrier, and this was not the case only with the Islamic text, rather with the text, the Hindu courts were also developed with the same objective, because the language barrier must not be there for colonial officials, and this blurred the British and native law for the first time, unquote. William Jones. Now, this is because we have got a number of such courts, but I have mentioned here these three only. So, the third one is the Digest of Hindu Law on Contracts and Successions. William Jones, when he was appointed to the Crown Court in 1783, he was not satisfied with the Halhed's translation. So what did he do? He was also not content with the excessive reliance on the indigenous scholars, on Pandits. So he started his own procedure, and then this digest came, Digest of Hindu Law on Contract and Succession, which was it was completed by H.T. Colebrook after the death of William Jones. So these efforts become important when we try to understand the process of codification of laws, because when we talk about the legacies of colonial legal system, and we still have imprints of these, the efforts which were taken up, the developments which were there rather. So the imprints are there, the legacies are there, and the legacies can be understood in three parts. The first part is codification of laws. Second part is the legislation covering different issues, and here we would be focusing on women's issues only. And third would be the judicial decisions, the case laws. So, when we talk about courts that have, that were there, that came into existence, that got developed during the colonial period, what do we see? That this, because the codification is the first step, the familiarity with the system, with the people, with the laws of the people, obviously was the first step, tiny step. So the colonial legal system, it changed the Indian pluralistic indigenous laws, where adaptability was a unique feature to those of a codified, rigid and state-controlled system that was intended to govern and control. Because now the objective was, how can, governance be facilitated? So in order to facilitate the smooth governance, in order to exercise control over the indigenous people, this entire framework was laid down. So the British made penetrations into the local traditions and flexibility by applying the codified Hindu and Islamic law while imposing Victorian notions of morality and bureaucracy. So this was also there, the subtle changes that got introduced in the Indian legal system, into the Indian multiple systems rather, and fluid systems. So in the process, Brahmanical norms were elevated as applicable to all, making deep alterations into the socio-legal landscape. So the people, a number of caste, subcaste groups who had their own customary laws, and we will be discussing it in detail, their practices, customary practices, got sidelined, got marginalized in the process of codification and in the entire process of development of colonial legal system. And these, most of the times, these were people of lower caste, and women of these groups were the ones who were badly affected. Their rights got curtailed through these developments. So from the outset of the British rule, colonial officials had sought to govern Indians in accordance with their own existing religious practices, customs and traditions. So this was the stated stance. However, there came various transformations in this approach which led to the codification of various textual sources, one which we discussed just now, and then a series of legislative reforms which we will be taking up one by one in the next sessions. Apart from the legislation, role of judiciary would be the third important arena where we would be entering into, and all these have their own significance, and through these interventions we will get to know the attitude of the colonial administration specifically towards women's issues. In her work, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak encapsulates the paternalistic and colonial justification for their rule, for the imperial rule which was there. And what do we see? That the colonial powers, what did they do? They masked their oppression and portrayed themselves as saviors and on the civilizing mission, which we discussed in the beginning, that there was this idea that these people, the colonizers, they gave this justification that the colonized ones, the indigenous people, they need this rule. This rule is, colonial rule is actually in their interest. Why? Because these people are uncivilized, they are cruel to their women especially. So we need to bring civilization to their societies. And so this idea was there that Englishmen saving colonized women from colonized men, in order to dismantle the patriarchal setup. Uh, and that is why this idea is there, what Spivak says, that white men saving brown women from brown men. And how did all this unfold? How did all this happen? We will cover in coming sessions. And before coming to the end of this idea, another important development was the establishment of law commissions. And we had 4 law commissions during this period to bring a coherent body of substantive laws. These law commissions were set up. First law commission was under the leadership of Thomas Macaulay, and it produced the draft of Indian Penal Code 1860. And we had this draft till now, until very recently, when this substantive law IPC got replaced, got substituted by BNS, which we will also take in the upcoming sessions of this entire course. So 3 more law commissions came into existence, codifying contracts, evidence, negotiable instruments, etc. Criminal procedure was also there. So what do we try to understand here in this very first session, that and why is colonial legal procedure, colonial legal system important for us? Because we need to know our history. When we talk about women and law in India, and different types of legal developments concerning women having an impact on their status at present and obviously in future, we also need to know what had happened in past. And the colonial past is the one which is having a direct association and a direct bearing on, direct reflection on the present status. So I hope that this is understandable, and we will take forward our discussion in the next session, and we will be taking up the second aspect, that is the legislative reforms. Thank you so much.